Hello everyone, and welcome to Conrail's Ohio and West Virginia Division. The Ohio and West Virginia Division is an HO scale model railroad designed by me, C.R. Steve, and it's based loosely on a cross between Conrail's Cleveland line and the West Virginia secondary. I grew up along the Cleveland line, so it's a double track main line obviously, but I have a bit of a fondness for the West Virginia scenery, so I went with more of a mountainy flavor here. But sit back, relax, and enjoy as we do a full tour of the O&WV, and I try to show every last spot. Maybe we'll even catch a train or two along the way. Alright everybody, so welcome to the Ohio and West Virginia Division. As you can see here, we have our track plan up right now, but before we start diving into different places and all the different nitty gritty of things, I want to cover some of the basics of the O&WV first. And first off, it is an HO scale layout. I have to make sure I mention that because I tend to forget to mention that. All of our track on the layout is Pico Code 83. I chose that at the time because I thought it looked the best, because all I knew about was Code 83 and Code 100. I didn't know there was Code 70 at the time, and in hindsight, I wish I would have used Code 70 and then the yard area, but the Code 83 works pretty good. All of the turnouts are, again, Pico. They're either number 5s or number 6s, depending on what I had at the time I built it. So it kind of can vary depending on the location. I believe everything in the yard's a 5, and most of them are all 5s, but there's a handful of 6s out there. All of the curves this is kind of a loose one. They're between 22 and 23 degrees for the most part. Some of them ended up a little wonky. I wasn't exactly the best when I laid the track here, and I've went back and tried to fix some of the curves as best I can, but my original goal was to be around a 22 to 23 degree radius. Wish I would have went bigger. Again, hindsight's 2020. I wish I would have went for about a 26 to 28 degree, but at the same time, with the amount of space I had to work with, I wanted to get as much bang for my buck as far as usable space and having as much going on as I could. So I went with the 22 to 23, and it works out all right for the most part. The layout is of a modular design and has different varying bench work, and that's how we're going to break up this tour and go from place to place. The total dimensions are the layout is 16 feet long and it's 8 feet wide. As you guys can kind of tell here, so our bench work's all going to be for the most part 2 feet wide by 4 feet long, each individual bench area. There are, a few places we're going to note there's some additions in the corners, and then for the locomotive shop area also there's a large addition in the front. That piece is a foot wide by 6 feet long, so kind of facilitated the shop area there. And last but certainly not least, all of the backdrops on the layout are from trackside scenery. I believe it's the Hickory Hollow collection is where those from. I absolutely love those backdrops, and they're a very important part of my scenery and really bring the scenery together. Shout out to them, because back right after I started the channel, they actually saw one of my videos and posted it on their Facebook page. It's still kind of a big deal to me, even though it's, little things. But either way, let's go ahead and let's dive in here and start going through our track plan. All right, so our first stop here on the tour of the O&WV is going to be the Sherman Junction module. This module was actually the first place I did any scenery work on the layout, and it actually is a place that I just recently redid a bunch of scenery work on here recently, so let's head on over to the layout and take a closer look. All right, so our first stop here on our tour of the O&WV is the Sherman Junction module of the layout, and this module actually starts right about here, going in a straight line back. It's kind of an odd spot here because my crossovers to go between track number 1, which is my outer track, and track number 2, my inner track, kind of dictated that this ended up being a little bit longer than the module itself. So I actually have one turnout right on the joint there, but kind of is what it is. If you look here in the front, we have our switch for the inner track here. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, the Selznick secondary or the Richard's Yard track or something, because it's kind of my inner track that goes to Richard's Yard. But this front part of the scenery I just recently redid. Again, this turnout here goes to S. Selznick Paper Recyclers, and this very front track will actually go in front and does an entire loop around the inside of the layout, which you guys will see later. And this track actually is the turnout for the siding for Selznick. Over here we have an actual grade crossing that does work here. That was in a layout update a few months ago. And if you kind of look in the back here, we have our Sherman connection here to go from track 2 over to the Selznick secondary. There is kind of a back way into the yard. You guys will see later as this tour goes around the circle here, so to speak. Back here in the back, we actually have some locomotive tracks as well as 2 yard storage tracks. And we also have the start of our branch line that's supposed to go down to the lower level that was never finished, but it was finished, but it never worked right. But that's a whole nother story. But essentially, I'll go ahead and overlay some pictures of some closer up details and go ahead and reset up the camera here to get this scene from another angle. All right, so here we are at the opposite end of the Sherman Junction module here, and our module essentially ends right straight down this line here, roughly. So this is supposed to be like an abandoned diamond area over here where a main line used to come across. It's been abandoned. It's being ripped out now. Got my signals here for my interlocking. Those are controlled by an Azatrax system using infrared. I don't have the patience to do the fancy stuff with the computer to do it, all that block detection, all that stuff. I don't have the patience for it. But again, just kind of have a little bit of a maintenance away kind of scene going on over here. And then in the background, we have our old abandoned, well, not necessarily abandoned tower, but not really used as much tower with the big guy standing outside here. We'll get a little bit better pictures of this. They'll overlay over the top of it, but that's supposed to be, in my world, that's Big Mike Bednar. Any of you guys that watch the old Conrail videos, you guys will know him from narrating a bunch of them, and kind of have that as my little tribute to him here on the layout. But this is the Sherman Junction area, just a lot of little detail work and really cool stuff, and quite a bit going on over here. All right, so our next stop on our tour here would be the next module counterclockwise on our tour. And here we have a pair of bridges going across a valley here. And if you look down here way in the bottom back, there's actually two tracks that were for the lower level that aren't really used right now for various reasons. But this is kind of our first oddball module, and the fact that it's 2 feet by 2 feet. The reason being is you'll see our lift out section to the left here in a minute when we get to it, and that's kind of what made me break this up and have this oddball module. And since it was going to be an odd size, I decided to go ahead and do something odd with it and have the two different bridges here. Probably one of my more favorite scenes here. Well, I really like all of them, but one of my ones I really enjoy. It's just hard to get a good camera angle to film with when I'm making videos for YouTube. So I try to put them in when I can. It's just hard to get a good angle on it. But this whole area is really neat. So we'll go on to the lift out section here next. All right, so next we're over here at our other 2 foot by 2 foot module section here, and this is what was supposed to be a lift out section originally, and as you guys can tell, it's no longer actually a lift out. It ended up just kind of being a permanent part of the scenery. Here in the front we have the Selznick secondary here heading over towards Richard Yard, which we'll be getting to here shortly. And if we go to our right here, we'll actually be going back towards the Sherman connection and the bridges, etc. Now, one of the things I wanted to have more of here on the layout, but just didn't have the space for, was having some kind of like mountainous areas and cuts and stuff. And our double track main line's actually behind this little ridge here. And I'll throw some photos in of that if I can remember to take them here. But those are, I would kind of like that, having a cut between with the two tracks down between it. It just kind of makes it neat. And then kind of having our old secondary track up here in the front that's in a little bit rougher shape but still getting used. And again, me and my maintenance away equipment obviously got backhoe and just a bunch of little details here and there, but kind of a neat little spot, and kind of something I didn't really plan on doing scenery for originally because it was supposed to be a lift out section that I ended up just kind of going a little crazy with. So really neat little spot here. All right, so we're to our first corner here, our first curved area, our first curved module, which ends right off the left side of the camera here. It's really hard to get a good angle on this, so I'm gonna have to shoot a bunch of video to put over top of this here. But our two track double main lines coming around our curve here, we have one signal in the back for track 1, and then we have our other signal here for track 2, as well as our turnout to head into the entrance to Richard's Yard at CP Rich, which is right here, of course. Now here in front of that, we have our Selznick secondary track going around, heading over towards the bridges, etc. in Sherman Junction. And this is another area I just did a bunch of scenery work, so any of you that have following along are going to be very familiar with this area. Over in the very way back there, we actually have a spur off of track 1, our mainline track, that services fiber core mills. They take box cars as well as tank cars, and there's a turnout off of the turnout there that basically splits them so that the tank cars go back over there and the box cars can go in the building. As you guys can see, there's no box car in there. And if any of you are curious, where did I get the name Fiber Core Mills from? That was actually a actual paper mill in Massillon, Ohio that I hauled a lot of cardboard into when I worked for a cardboard recycling company. So I went there for a number of years, and then unfortunately they went bankrupt and got renamed. It's a whole thing, but I have a lot of fond memories of going there. So on this version of the layout, I wanted to really have that to kind of remember all that. And like I said, a lot of fond memories and good people down there. So a really neat little corner layout. Just something I've been slowly trying to do scenery on a little bit at a time, and something neat to look at here. All right, so for our next stop here on our tour, we're going to be over here at the entrance to Richard's Yard. As you guys can see, I have my little Richard's Yard sign. I was named after my grandfather on my mom's side. That kind of was the one that used to take me to see the trains when I was a kid. So that's kind of where I got it, where all this started, so to speak. Always used to take me to our local yard every week during the summer when I was growing up, and that's why I model late 90s Conrail now, because that's when I grew up and that's what I got to go see with him. So in his memory, I got the yard named after him, obviously. But this is the entrance to it here, coming off of track 2. And then, of course, we have our track from the Slesnick secondary coming down in here. We have a little dwarf signal right here that actually protects the entrance to the main line. And then we also have a signal here on track 2. And then over there in the corner, we have a signal for track 1. And the reason they're kind of split up and odd like they are is because I didn't plan on doing signals when I originally did this layout. It was kind of one of those things that once I found out about like the Azatrax deal and the infrared stuff, I realized I could actually do it. So went ahead and did that. But in the background, we have another spur track here going over to Allega cement contractor. Any of you that are from Northeast Ohio, I'm sure will have heard of Allega again. And it's just, another memory from when I was a kid driving by them down in the valley as a kid. So when I decided to put a cement plant here on the layout and I needed to name it, that was what I went with. So again, there's a lot of little details and little places that I'm sure I'll be overlaying some video with here, kind of give a little bit closer look at everything. But this module starts, like right about the middle of our road and goes straight back, and then it goes right in front of our yard tower and our locomotive storage tracks here for Richard's Yard. So either way, a really neat spot, and another place that any of you that have watched the videos for a long time would be very, very familiar with this spot here. All right, so we finally made it over here to Richard's Yard, and right now we're looking at our 4 main locomotive storage tracks here. Is right through here, these 4. This, of course, is kind of our lead track to go over to our locomotive service facility, and it's right about long enough to get 3 4-axle locomotives to be able to come all the way through and then go back out the turnout to get out of the locomotive service area. And then we also have a track right back here by the yard office for an additional pair of locomotives as well. Went with this yard tower over here simply because I thought it looked cool. No real reason other than that. And of course, in the background, I'll have to get a closer shot of it, but we have a coaling tower just because, again, I thought it looked cool and figured it would look kind of neat to have a mainline coaling tower here on the layout, even if it's not in use anymore. Of course, I need to weather it and actually finish it one of these days, but still a really, really neat piece, and just kind of a cool area. When I originally designed this layout, I really wanted to have as big of a yard as I possibly could, just because that's what I grew up watching as a kid, was watching GP38s and GP38-2s switch at local yards. So it was really important to me to have a bunch of yard tracks to try and have as many locomotives sitting on as I could, just because that's what I remember as a kid. Probably 10 to 12 GP38s sitting at a time, and just cool stuff like that. So when I designed the yard, that was what I went with over here, was trying to fit as many in as I could, and worked out pretty good. All right, so this is where it starts to get a little bit hectic and wild because there's turnouts everywhere and everything's crazy. But we're going to go ahead and try and cover this, and we're going to break this in half, and we're going to talk about our yard part right now, and then we'll talk about our locomotive shops, our diesel service area, and our caboose shop, which is out of frame. But we actually have 5 yard tracks, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then there's one track that'll go and runs pretty much as a loop in and around between the maintenance away and the yard itself, so that way you could run through. And then, of course, you look back this way, coming towards the camera here, we have our tracks going off to our locomotive parking here by our yard office. We also have, if we follow our track down here, we have a track that's for sand cars, as well as it could store a caboose here and there from time to time. And we look over here, we have our 2 diesel service center tracks. So the yard's a very, very busy, wild spot here. It's kind of hard to decipher, so I'll definitely be showing the track plan to really kind of give you a little better idea of what's going on over here, because it's a lot going on in a small spot. But again, as I mentioned, I wanted to have as much yard as I could in as little space as possible. All right, so now we're over here. We're pretty much going to split our front locomotive service track, caboose, shop area, and all that in half here. We're going to kind of split and break this up a little bit. As we look back towards our yard office, here's our caboose shop here in the very, very front. We have 3 diesel service tracks here for the locomotive shops, and this very track right here comes up and goes into our caboose shop. Behind these 3 service tracks, we have the fueling pad tracks right back here. So there's quite a bit to see here. We got 2 sand towers. There's that one, and then there's another that's just out of frame over here. But a lot going on in a very small space here for what I'm trying to do. I've got way more power than I could ever possibly use on this railroad, but that's what I like. So I like to have a lot of it here. Still want to add some more little details here and there in this area, but it's just kind of, as far as I've gotten with it. I like to do scenery when I'm in the mood to and not force myself. So let me go ahead and flip around the camera and you guys can take a closer look at the locomotive shops. All right, so now we're looking the opposite direction of where we just were here. We have our sanding tower that was out of frame there. And if we look, we have our front track that goes up towards our caboose, that goes up and then leads to our caboose track here for the caboose shop. We have our 1, 2, and 3 diesel service tracks here for the locomotive shops. And then we have our 1 and 2 fuel pad tracks, as well as behind that's our sanding car track, if you're following along here, or trying to, in the insanity. I have my locomotive shop is named after my grandfather on my dad's side of the family. He used to collect things. He was all about collecting stuff. So if you guys saw my collection of trains down here, you'd say I definitely took after him a little bit because, well, I like to collect stuff too. So, just kind of like to have little reminders of people that mean a lot to you. And, that's part of having a railroad and doing this stuff, is to be able to name things as you want to, as opposed to doing everything prototypical and having things exact. So that was kind of why I went with my own deal with this here. So let's go ahead and let's move on down the yard a little bit farther here. All right, so here we are looking down the back side of the diesel shops here. We could see our 1 and number 2 diesel fuel pad tracks. Up here, this track and this track are both for maintenance away. This particular track is actually one of the tracks that goes around to the Sleznik secondary. This is the actual Sleznik secondary track here in the front, but this is the one that actually goes to the Sleznik docks themselves, although I modeled a bit of an abandoned stretch between here and there, so you guys will get to see that. This is my maintenance of way car storage track right here, and then this, of course, is our run-through track from one side to the other. That all the turnouts kind of branch off of this particular track and they all come back into it. So let me go ahead and flip the camera around and we'll talk about some more cool stuff here behind me. All right, so now we're looking the opposite direction here, looking over more towards our corner here in the back. Now, that mountain actually there is to hide our hidden track, which is in the very, very back, that actually is supposed to go down to the lower level and does go down to the other level. It's just not in service right now. So that whole mountain's made out of foam to disguise that track, and there's a tunnel portal over there. I'll go ahead and get some footage of that so you guys can kind of see. And then, of course, our another oddball piece here in the this corner here, we have this little piece that comes across and helps us bring out, give me more room to put track here in this corner so I can get a little bit wide, a little bit more in here. Otherwise, I would be pretty much missing a bunch of these tracks up here, and pretty much all these tracks right here in the very front. So kind of had to do that to fit that in. But I'll go ahead and get some footage of kind of back there by that mountain corner, and we'll kind of take a look over towards the bridge here, this module here, and kind of take a look at the next location we have. All right, so now we're looking over towards our overpass here, looking towards this. The overpass is pretty much the dividing point of the module here, but here at this end of the railroad, we have in the very front out of the camera frame is the track for the Selznick secondary. Immediately behind it is a maintenance away storage track for ballast cars. Then we got a little bit of maintenance away equipment over here. We have some more storage for maintenance away cars, which there's actually a turnout right in here that splits. And then here you can kind of see all of our yard tracks are all starting to funnel back together and head underneath the bridge and out of Richard's yard. Back in the back here with these gondolas parked out, it's actually track number 2. And behind that we have track number 1. And of course we have our location here on the railroad is Control Point Duke. My uncle's nickname. He's been an engineer for CSX for I think 20 years now. So of course I had to nickname part of the railroad after him, you know, so when I needed a location name, that was what I went with over here. But this is just a neat scene. Again, we have more signals here. We have the signal for track 1 is on this side of the bridge, and then track 2 signal is on the other side. But an area I'm still working on a little bit at a time, and just a cool little spot here, but the end of the yard. All right, so now we're looking in here into our maintenance of way yard here for at the end of Richard's yard. We have our 2 tracks for gondolas, and then there's a little dock in here that they could load and unload things off of. As you can tell, there's way too many trucks over here right now, but I've built too many and I don't have enough room to put them. As I mentioned in the last part, the bridge is our dividing line between our 2 modules here. And in the back, we have our signal for number 2 track. And then behind our 2 mainline tracks is our branch line going down to the lower level, which is the Sherman branch, I believe is what I was going to end up calling that. But really, really neat little area. And then, of course, up here in the front, this bench work would actually only come up to like right about there and come across roughly, just kind of making, you know, some lines here. That would be about what it is, but we have these triangle pieces here in the corner. And all right, so now we're looking deep straight over into the corner. We're looking straight over there. Back in the far corner back there is a old coal tipple that's currently still needing to be weathered because, you know, I procrastinate, but it's going to be abandoned here on the layout because it's right up against the wall and I can't actually run any coal cars under it. Right now there's a bunch of cement hoppers stored over there. It's those are the 2 tracks from Sherman Yard. So here's our truck facility or truck service facility here for the maintenance away shops. I know it's a railroad. They're not going to have a bunch of Kenworths and nice trucks, but I'm a truck driver and it's my railroad. So I want to drive a Kenworth. I want Kenworths for my model railroad too. So, you know, got to have what you got to have. But our front triangle piece here has our Selznick secondary track, and then behind that is the track that you guys will see real shortly here, goes right up to the docks at Selznick. In this stretch, it's supposed to be abandoned, so the secondary's in service, but the second track here is actually abandoned and not used. I planned on putting some cross ties in the rails and stuff. I just haven't done that yet because I haven't gotten around to it. Alright, so we're down to our last module now. We're going to start off looking at the loading dock area for Selznick paper recyclers. As you guys can see, there's a trailer backed up to the dock, there's a truck sitting behind it, and there's one coming around the building. This track here is the track that was abandoned right at the next crossing here for maintenance away storage, and from here out it's used for box cars for Selznick paper recyclers. And in the very, very front is the Selznick secondary coming around and going back over. So behind that we actually have our track that comes out of Richard's yard and ties back in. And then track 1 and track 2, obviously, we have our Sherman branch down here, which, as you guys can tell, there's a CSX coal train sitting on right now, because that's where CSX would be coming off the Sherman branch to interchange with Conrail. And in the back, we have our 2-yard storage tracks for interchange with CSX. All right, so here we are looking back towards the entrance to Slesnik Paper Recyclers. Again, our 2 tracks here in the front are Slesnik Secondary, and of course our track for the Slesnik dock for boxcars for loading recycled cardboard. We have track 2 and track 1 back here, as well as their signals, the tri-light style ones. I'll try to get I'll get a picture of it looking down towards the camera right now. And then behind that, we of course have our CSX units are parked on the Sherman branch, and then behind that we have the 2 tracks for yard storage. So that's going to actually bring us all the way back around to where we started here at the Sherman Junction module. Like right here, going across is actually our dividing point, and that's where we are going to come right back to where it starts again. So it's not really going anywhere kind of layout. You're not really going point to point. It's pretty much a loop that 90% of is the yard, but hey, it's my railroad, and that's what I wanted to do. So, all right, so that's going to conclude our main portion here of our layout tour. I wanted to go ahead and throw in here at the end basically me holding up my camera phone here and walking around the layout piece by piece to try and tie everything together. We're going to start off here right where we started at with our actual tour here by Sherman Junction. You guys can see the branch going off over to the Slesnik Secondary there. There's our bridge scene. And immediately past that, we go into what's our module that was supposed to be a lift out there with the cuts and the little hill. In the background, we have fiber core mills there in the corner. And of course, we come up here to the entrance to Richard's Yard here. And, in the background there, we have a leg of cement. And here we are over at our yard office and locomotive tracks right there. Of course, a little shot down the yard here where we can look at all the cars and all the locomotive storage tracks. Up front here, we have the caboose shop. And as you guys can see, way too many locomotives jammed in here, but, you know, got our 3 tracks going into our locomotive shops, and as well as our 2 fuel pad tracks there by the sanding towers. And looking at the back side of the shops here, looking kind of back down the yard a little bit. You guys kind of see that little hill in the background there with that disguises our hidden track with the tunnel. Our maintenance away tracks in the front. Looking over towards CP Duke and the bridge here. And looking over at our maintenance away yard as well here with all of our equipment in it. And in the back corner, our coal tipple. And here we are back at Slesnik Paper Recyclers, and right back where we just started doing our loop here. So go ahead and throw up our track plan here in the background, but that's going to be our tour here of Conrails, Ohio and West Virginia Division. Hope you guys all enjoyed this. Hope it makes some sense. It's not too confusing and complicated. I tried to put the track maps in there to where they wouldn't block the view too much, but you'd still be able to see it to kind of make sense of my babble as I'm, rambling on about everything. But I know a lot of you wanted to see kind of a track plan and all that, and I don't know if I mentioned it yet in this, but the track plan's not exactly perfect, but it's as close as I can get it within reason on the computer. It's really difficult to take tracks that are already put down and try and put them in a track plan, so kind of had to make do the best I could. But hopefully you guys enjoy this. I'd like to thank everybody for watching, everybody that subscribes and comments. Any questions you guys might still have here on the layout, feel free to ask them down in the comments, and I'll do the best I can to answer them, or make a video in the future if it's something that would kind of require a video to answer. But as always, guys, thank you guys again for watching. I'm thinking I'm going to throw a little train action in here at the end. Maybe we'll catch that coiled steel train one more time.